Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel Paromita PM. I am Paromita and I heartily welcome you once again. If you are new to my channel, I would request you to go through the content of my channel, and if you really find the videos helpful, then do like it, share it, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and also turn on the notification bell so that you do not miss out any updates. And now, without any further ado, let's get into the lecture. In this lecture, I'll be looking at a very famous modernist poem, Musee Arts, by the American poet W.H. Auden, who was born in 1907 and died in 1973. When W.H. Auden was a young boy, he saw United Kingdom participating in the First World War, which started in 1914 and continued till 1918. When he was in his college days, he found that the world where he was born was completely different from the one that he witnessed in his college days. And then W.H. Auden began to write poetry during a time when changes were taking place in poetics and all over the world. People's beliefs were shattered because of the devastations that were caused by the First World War. And with the emergence of the 20th century, we saw a huge change in poetry. So we found that modernist poets, they simply, did away with the conventional mode of writing poetry. This completely abandoned the conventional style, or let's say the Victorian or the 19th century traditional style of writing poetry. The modernist poets, they completely abandoned the traditional form of writing poetry, the traditional rhyme scheme, themes, everything. And that marked a huge transformation in modern poetry. So we can say that modern poetry completely departed from the Victorian traditional style of writing poetry. The early 20th century poets were mainly concerned about projecting the real world as it was, even if it was harsh or unpleasant, but it hardly mattered to them. They only wanted to provide a picture of the world in a realistic manner, and this is clearly visible in the poem Musee Arts by Auden, where we find how much the poet is concerned about human suffering, because in this poem we come to see the true nature of human suffering, which he does brilliantly using the vehicle of painting. As far as Auden is concerned, he became familiar with modernist poets like T.S. Eliot while he was studying at Oxford, and he also wrote letters to him, and these letters stand as a proof that how much he was excited to be a part of the movement, then movement that appeared to be so exciting to him. Now, if we look at the poem Musee Arts, we shall see that it is one of the best examples of modern poetry. The first reason being that it completely departs from the traditional style of writing poetry. It doesn't have the traditional pattern, or it doesn't have the proper rhyme scheme. It has a rhyme scheme, but it is inconsistent. So we can say that this poem has an irregular rhyme scheme. Like, as far as the structure is concerned, there too we find that it doesn't conform to the conventional structure of a poem. Secondly, we can say that when it comes to punctuation, even the poem does not have punctuation in the proper grammatical manner. It has ungrammatical punctuation. So these are some of the features that make this poem stand out as one of the famous, or let's say one of the most important examples of modern poetry. And last but not the least, the theme that Auden has chosen for his poem, that is human suffering, that also makes it stand out among other poems because it reflects the changing attitudes of the post-World War times, because we find in this poem human indifference to personal tragedy. So that all these features, together contribute to making this poem Musée de Beaux Arts a wonderful specimen of modernist poetry. Now let us have a look at the poem and let us read the poem, and I will provide you with an in-depth analysis of the poem. The poem Musée de Beaux Arts was published in 1940, although it was written in 1938. It was in 1938 when Auden paid a visit to Brussels, when he was in Brussels in Belgium, and there he paid a visit to the Royal Museum of Fine Arts. So this poem, Musée de Beaux Arts, is a commentary on the bizarre human situations. Here we find the speaker giving opinion on the paintings that deal with human suffering. As we read the poem, we shall find that the tone of the poem is very casual, and he has also written it in prosaic speech. Firstly, to heighten the mood of the poem, and secondly, to highlight the fact that he is discussing a very serious subject. So if we read the poem, we shall find that the main themes that this poem focuses on are human suffering, tragedy, pain, and at the same time it provides a contrast with regard to those people who are suffering and those who do not suffer at all. So here, in order to achieve this, in order to provide readers with this contrast, or to focus on the nature of human suffering, personal tragedy, Auden has used the vehicle of painting, the work of Renaissance painters. So now let us have a look at the poem and let us read it. About suffering, they were never wrong. Here the word they, it refers to the painters, the Flemish painters, the Renaissance painters. So the speaker is saying that they had true knowledge about human suffering. The old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place, so that it does not touch, suffering which does not touch everyone. So they knew it very well that when we find someone else suffering, it is not necessary that it would always touch us. So this is the nature, or this is the true nature of human suffering. And the old masters, they had immense knowledge, they had true knowledge about it, so they were never wrong. And the way they depicted human suffering in their painting, it appears to be so very realistic and relatable at the same time. About suffering, they were never wrong. So they portrayed the nature of human suffering in their painting, the old masters, how well they understood its human position, how it takes place. While someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. So while someone is eating, or maybe just opening a window, or someone is just walking, dully, just passing by, we find that some other people are suffering somewhere else, but these people are not aware of it. So the rest of the world was experiencing life as usual. They were carrying on with their mundane activities. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth. So here the reference is made to the impending birth of Christ, and the painting here he refers to is the census at Bethlehem by Peter Bruegel the Elder, which depicts that how on one hand the elderly people are awaiting the birth of Christ, while at the same time there always must be children who did not specially want it to happen, which means that children on the other hand are seen playing. They are busy with their own playing and they are skating on a pond at the edge of the wood. So here another reference is made to a painting which is called Winter Landscape with Skaters and a Bird Trap. Here we find that children are throwing snowballs at each other, and it is winter time. They are busy playing with their toys. So ordinary activities or mundane activities are going on one hand, and at the same time we find a momentous event is about to take place, which is the birth of Christ. So the extraordinary seems to exist within the ordinary experience of life. We cannot segregate the extraordinary or the momentous events from the ordinary events or the mundane activities that take place. And according to the speaker, the old masters or the Renaissance painters, they knew it very well that when one person suffering occurs, at the same time someone is seen relishing or enjoying his comfort. So two events take place at a time. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. So another painting is referred to here, which is Massacre of the Innocents. So this Massacre of the Innocents refers to a narrative in the Gospel of Matthew where Herod the great king ordered the execution of all male children who were 2 years old and under 2 years in the vicinity of Bethlehem. So here the speaker says that while young children, innocent children are being killed, which is a terrible event, a very momentous event, because innocents are being slaughtered. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. Now, these lines are very significant because here we find that the ordinary and the extraordinary are juxtaposed, and this is deliberately done by the poet to suggest that we should condemn, or human indifference should be condemned. It is something condemnable, but at the same time it should be remembered that the extraordinary and the ordinary fall under the same scheme of things. We cannot segregate the extraordinary from the ordinary events. So while on one hand it is seen that innocent children are being killed, but at the same time we find that the dogs who are completely oblivious of this event, who do not have any idea, they go on with their own life. Like the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse is seen that a horse is scratching its back behind on a tree. So basically a significant image is juxtaposed with an insignificant image. Like if we look at these lines, that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course, which is very significant, which is a very significant image here. It is immediately juxtaposed with another image where a dog is found continuing with his doggy life, and where a horse is seen scratching its back against a tree. So like I said, that two different events are juxtaposed in order to show indifference, or in order to focus on the nature of suffering. In Bruegel's Icarus, so in the final stanza, we find that the famous painting by Peter Bruegel the Elder, The Fall of Icarus, is referred to. Icarus, we know, is a character in Greek mythology who was given a pair of wings by his father Daedalus, because when the father and the son, they were locked in the labyrinth of Minos, they wanted to escape, and in order to escape, what the inventor Daedalus did, he provided with a pair of he used feather and wax in order to prepare a pair of wings. But as far as Icarus is concerned, he did not pay heed to his father's advice, and he flew close to the sun. And as he flew close to the sun, what happened is his waxen wings melted and he fell into the sea. So that painting is referred to here. And how people, other people, when they find Icarus, plunging into the sea or the ocean, continue with their mundane activities and hardly get bothered about this event, because for them this is not an quote unquote an important failure. So they continue with their mundane activities and they do not bother to look at him or save Icarus from drowning. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away. So when Icarus falls from the sky and plunges into the sea, we find that how everything turns away. Everybody around, they simply turn away from this momentous event, even when they find someone dying before their eyes, quite leisurely from the disaster. So Icarus's falling into the sea is a disaster, but for them this is not at all an important event. So therefore they don't bother and they prefer to continue with their mundane activities. Quite leisurely, how everything turns away, quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash. So there was a plowman who was tilling the field, but he may have heard the splash because he fell into the sea, plunged into the sea, the forsaken cry. But the cry went unacknowledged. He did not bother to pay any attention to Icarus's cry. So here the idea of separateness is highlighted by Auden, because on one hand we find that people are at work, they are at play. Some people are at play, some people are doing their work, they carry on with their daily activities, while someone faces or encounters a disaster. Because as far as Icarus is concerned, we find here that Icarus plunges into the sea, yet the plowman continues to till the field. So while disaster continues or the disaster occurs somewhere else, they continue with their daily work. But for him, it was not an important failure, like I said, for the plowman. Now, why did the plowman, why he didn't pay any attention to Icarus? Because for him, it was not at all an important failure. For him, carrying on with his daily activities appeared to be something more important than this disaster. The sun shone as it had to on the white legs, disappearing into the green water. So even the sun shone as it had to, because the sun is bound to rise and the sun is also bound to set. So again, even the sun also disappeared, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. So when Icarus was plunging, when he was falling into the sea, a very expensive, delicate ship was passing by. It was sailing by. But the ship also, even the people in that ship, they didn't bother. They saw someone and it appeared to them that someone was falling into the sea. It appeared to them as something very amazing. And what happened? Did they bother to save Icarus from drowning? No. The ship did not make, the people in the ship, they did not bother and they did not make any attempt to save Icarus from drowning. Rather, the ship went on. It moved on with their life undisturbed, because they didn't want their life to be disturbed. They had somewhere to get to and sailed calmly on. So, although someone was seen dying, although someone was seen falling into the sea, yet we find that it hardly made any impression on a passing ship. So as we can see the events that are depicted in the poem, we can see that how people continue with their mundane activities, how children are seen playing with snowballs, how children are seen, playing with their toys, and they don't even, have any idea, or they don't even bother whether Christ is going to take birth or not, while we find the elderly people eagerly waiting for the birth of Christ. So on one hand, they are awaiting an extraordinary event, while at the same time we find people, continuing with their ordinary activities. And that is used, like I said, this juxtaposition of the ordinary and the extraordinary is used to highlight the indifference of human suffering. How people, or how human beings, are indifferent to the suffering of others. So the idea that is conveyed by Auden here, that unless we suffer, unless we undergo any suffering, we hardly get touched, or we hardly get bothered by the sufferings of others, because for us their suffering or the personal tragedy of someone is insignificant, is not an important failure, and therefore it does not touch us in any way. And as humans are, as we can see here, that they carry on with their mundane daily activities, their familiar duties. And what we do as human beings is that we carry on with our mundane activities as long as we can, because we know that we are not suffering. So as long as we do not undergo suffering, we do not pay importance, or we do not pay heed to the suffering of others, and that leads to the indifferent attitude on the part of mankind. So the old masters. So now if we look at the old masters, that why Auden has used this vehicle of painting in order to focus on the true nature of human suffering, is that the old masters, they depicted, or they depicted human suffering in their paintings in such a way that appeared completely realistic, and we could very well relate to the events that are portrayed in their paintings. And what is more important, or let's say what appears to be very, very significant with regard to the old masters, that which makes Auden, praise them so much, or use their paintings in order to comment on these strange human situations, is that the old masters, the Renaissance painters, they could simply, make a statement about life through their painting. And this is what is depicted in the poem. The purpose behind using the different paintings that Auden came across while visiting the Royal Museums of Fine Arts is that he got impressed himself, and when he saw these paintings, he understood that the old masters, or these painters, the Flemish painters, they had true knowledge about human suffering, and that is why he chose their paintings as a vehicle, as a medium to focus on the theme of human suffering, or to convey the true nature of human suffering. So with this, I come to the end of the lecture. I hope you have been able to understand the poem, and it comes of some help to you in understanding the poem. So if you like the video, do like it, share it, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. Until then, bye bye.